On this Friday night, an unexpected delay in Canada's vaccine rollout. Why doses of the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine are about to be slashed in half.
This kind of issue is out of our hands.
As bleak projections are made about the second wave. And fears increase a more contagious variant could spread like wildfire.
More people are going to become infected with it.
Plus, Saskatchewan's rising cases and rising anger over rule breakers.
Go work in the care home for a couple days and see how you feel.
And turning their backs on Trump.
It was a tough thing to abandon.
The Republicans who have had enough. Our Mike Armstrong is in Trump country.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I really wish I had some good news to start off the newscast tonight, but I'm sorry there just isn't any. We're still in the throes of the pandemic, of course, and now even the glimmer of hope of vaccines is a bit dimmer. The federal government has announced shipments of the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine will be reduced by 50% over the next 4 weeks. It's one of the two vaccines being given to Canadians right now. The problem is a shortage of vaccine being produced at Pfizer's manufacturing facility in Belgium, where Canada gets its doses. Pfizer, the government says, is pausing some production lines there so it can expand long-term manufacturing capacity. The biggest impact on Canada will be January 25th. Its hope shipments will then be back on track by the end of February.
This does not impact our goal to have enough vaccines available by September for every Canadian who wants one.
It does mean vaccine rollout, already slow, will get even slower in the weeks ahead. At the same time, new projections are out today that paint a grim picture of the trajectory of this second wave in Canada. At current infection rates, we're likely to see an increase of more than 200,000 new cases of COVID-19 over the next 9 days, and roughly 2,000 more Canadians could die. That would push the death toll to 20,000 in Canada. The global death toll hit another milestone today, surpassing 2 million. On top of all this, new, faster-spreading variants are now being detected in multiple countries, including in Canada. It's not believed they lead to more severe illness, but they are much more contagious, and case counts could skyrocket in ways the health system is simply not prepared for. Mike Drolet has our top story tonight.
2 weeks into the new year, a dire warning from Canada's top doctor. Follow public health protocols or even darker days are ahead.
Because in so many areas of the country, the virus is spreading in the community. The moment that you lift some of those, or increase contacts basically for individuals, it's expected that the virus will surge.
The latest projections show a surge to 10,000 cases a day, even if we maintain the status quo. An increase in community contacts could see the caseload rise above 30,000 per day. The only avenue to a decrease is if Canadians heed the warnings.
I know this isn't how you wanted to start the new year. It probably feels like deja vu all over again from 2020. This won't last forever. But for now, we have to buckle down.
Looking at the numbers, the growth of the second wave is showing no signs of slowing down, with an average of 7,900 new cases per day, which is 4 times as many as the peak in the first wave. And the number of Canadians dying from COVID-19 continues to rise as well. It's expected to soon surpass the peak from the spring, when healthcare professionals were still trying to understand the virus. And that's troubling for doctors who worry they'll soon have to make impossible choices about who they try to save.
The healthcare system underwrites so much more, the economy, businesses, jobs, etc. So we really have not got a true sense of the chaos that would result if we allow that to happen.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's considering new restrictions, including potentially banning flights from some countries. But he says it's up to the provinces to create COVID protocols that work for them, and he implores Canadians to follow them. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Something is going on in Windsor, Ontario. It has the fastest growing number of new cases of COVID-19 in the province. It is right across from the United States border. Today, the American Centers for Disease Control warned a much more contagious variant of COVID-19, the one first identified in the UK, is projected to become the dominant source of infection in the US by March. The head of the Windsor Hospital fears that fast-spreading variant is in his city, too. Eric Sorensen reports.
It's an unnerving distinction.
Windsor, Essex has surpassed every region in Ontario for new COVID-19 cases per capita. The spread has increased so quickly that Windsor Regional Hospital was forced to send some patients outside the region and has a temporary morgue in a trailer. The hospital's chief of staff thinks this could be the result of the so-called UK variant.
The efficient spread, the wide range of patients that are being infected with it, and the pattern that was very similar to what was occurring in the UK that triggered us to think that this is a possibility that the UK variant or some other mutation is present in our community.
Windsor is a region on the front lines. Health officials say many people were mobile over Christmas, and every day thousands cross from the United States into Windsor. Truckers with necessary food and goods for the country, and healthcare workers from Windsor who work in Detroit. Ontario's count of new COVID cases shows Windsor, Essex has spiked to 323 per 100,000 population per week. The 6 regions with the highest numbers are the 3 in the highest population area in and around Toronto, plus Windsor, Lambton, and Niagara, which all have border crossings to the U.S.
That's always in our concern that any of these cases, are we bringing it back to Windsor because of the difference in the prevalence of COVID in U.S.
The United States is a firestorm of COVID-19, and the growing worry is the new, faster-spreading variant. The U.S. Center for Disease Control says the new variant has the potential to increase the U.S. pandemic trajectory and become the dominant source of infection by March.
The fact that it spreads more efficiently, just by simple math, means more people are going to become infected with it. The more people that are infected, the more people that are going to be hospitalized, and unfortunately, the more people that will then die.
Public Health Ontario is currently testing virus samples from different parts of the province. Windsor health officials expect to learn next week if their samples turn up with the new variant that could explain the recent surge in cases and suggest where it's coming from. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
These more contagious variants can only be confirmed through genomic sequencing, which is more complex than a simple COVID test. Right now, the true scope of their spread in Canada is not certain. The UK variant was first detected in Canada last month in Ontario, and since then, at least 23 cases have been found across the country, the bulk of them in Ontario. 2 cases of a variant first detected in South Africa have been found in BC and Alberta. Saskatchewan's top doctor is threatening to bring down a hammer of new health restrictions next week. The province continues to have the highest rate of active cases per capita in Canada. Saskatchewan is averaging 313 new cases a day over the last week. There are fears that number could climb to more than 1,600 cases a day by the end of this month. Ryan Kessler reports on the additional pressure this will have on the province's healthcare system.
This is my mom sort of surviving COVID.
When Brian Albert looks at pictures of his mother, he sees resilience. 98-year-old Marie Albert overcame the virus, a feat they can only celebrate from afar.
I can't hold my mom's hand. I can't hug her. She looks at me and she gives me a virtual hug.
Marie lives in a Regina care home where at least 41 people have died from COVID-19. Her son is done with people defying public health orders.
They're idiots. They don't get it. This is not about one person. This is a world thing. It's not even Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan has the highest active case rate in Canada, with numbers increasing fastest in Saskatoon, the north, and far north. Saskatchewan's health authority has stated the system is at its most fragile point in the pandemic. One epidemiologist says it's time for tougher measures.
We need to declare that we will keep a lockdown and stricter restrictions in place until we see our numbers going down.
Dr. Nazim Muhajirin wants in-person dining halted and banquet halls and gyms closed. He also says students may need to return to online learning. The province's chief medical health officer did not offer specifics, but warned of further restrictions if case counts don't drop.
We'll be lucky to maintain the status quo. It's not trending down, and I think that's something we really need to think about.
As of Thursday, Saskatchewan's ICU capacity was at 95%. The biggest challenge is staffing. The Saskatchewan Union of Nurses says the province needs to consider scaling back health services.
Now we have a vaccination program that we need to get up and running, and we also have people's everyday regular illnesses that must be dealt with in a timely fashion.
It's a big burden for Saskatchewan's frontline workers, and with case counts rising, there is no relief in sight. Ryan Kessler, Global News, Saskatoon.
Canadians have been told for months to avoid non-essential travel, but apart from the Atlantic bubble, there's been no restriction on travel between provinces. BC's Premier says he is now seeking legal advice to determine whether an interprovincial travel ban is possible and constitutional.
Put this either to rest so that British Columbians understand that we cannot do that and we're not going to do that, or there is a way to do it and we're going to work with other provinces to achieve it.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has some harsh words for the Bloc Quebecois leader Yves-François Blanchet. Blanchet, in a statement in French, said questions arise about Canada's new transport minister, Omar Alghabra, because of his former role as head of the Canadian Arab Federation.
That kind of political pandering to the worst elements and to fears and anxieties has no place in Canada, and all of us need to stand up strongly to push back against that anywhere it happens in this country.
The Bloc Québécois claims Blanchet was simply raising questions about the minister's past. People in Newfoundland and Labrador are going to the polls on February 13th. Premier Andrew Furey leads a minority government and says with COVID-19 numbers so low there, the best and safest time to vote is now.
3 other provinces have had a general election, mind you, with numbers far greater than we have. It'll be different. There's no question about it, but we can do it safely, and the democratic process will continue, just as normal life has continued in the face of this pandemic.
Now to Washington, D.C. Prosecutors have formally walked back their assertion made in court filings that the alleged Capitol rioters intended to capture and assassinate elected officials when they stormed the Capitol building. The acting attorney general in Washington, D.C. says there's no evidence at this time of catch and kill teams. The Washington Post reports the violent mob did come perilously close to finding Vice President Mike Pence that day. Today, the area around the U.S. Capitol is already under intense security 5 days before President-elect Joe Biden is inaugurated. Jackson Prosco reports.
They call this the Green Zone, an unprecedented security perimeter ringing the U.S. Capitol, the White House, and most of downtown Washington. Spectators are simply not welcome, not at a time like this.
There's a great deal of very concerning chatter, and it's what you don't know that we are preparing for.
Ominous new details suggest the storming of the Capitol came perilously close to a massacre. USA! Police officers describe coming under violent assault by the mob.
Guys were like grabbing gear off my vest. I remember guys chanting, like, kill him with his own gun.
There's a probe into whether some members of Congress provided assistance to the rioters.
If they aided and abetted the crime, there may have to be actions taken beyond the Congress and in terms of prosecution.
Those same lawmakers now say they fear further violence. Some are even purchasing body armor.
It's sad that we have to get to that point, but our expectation is that someone may try to kill us.
The FBI warns the threat of domestic terror attacks will not end with the inauguration and could come to the doorstep of cities across the U.S.
There's so much concern about security in the coming days that a planned dress rehearsal for the inauguration here on the steps of the Capitol for Sunday had to be called off. At the same time, there's now talk of closing bridges into Washington, D.C. from neighboring Virginia, and vehicles driving in and around the city may even be subject to random search in the days ahead, Donna.
Jackson, President Trump has 5 days left. Usually the new president drives to the inauguration with the outgoing president. What do we know about Trump's plans?
No surprise here, he wants nothing to do with the inauguration of his successor, Joe Biden. In fact, he's planning to fly to Florida first thing in the morning on the 20th on Inauguration Day. He won't be anywhere near this. He won't have anything to do with the swearing in of Biden. That's in stark contrast to Vice President Mike Pence, who has indicated he may well attend the ceremony and who today phoned his successor, Kamala Harris, to congratulate her on her victory.
Okay, Jackson Prosco in Washington, thanks. Global News will have live coverage of the inauguration from Washington, D.C. on Wednesday morning at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific. A strong earthquake strikes Indonesia. Coming up, the search for survivors trapped in the wreckage as the death toll climbs. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake hit Indonesia overnight. A search is underway and at least 42 people are known to have died. Rescue teams are doing all they can to reach the survivors. The quake toppled homes and businesses and triggered landslides. Thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes. A political shockwave rocked the Netherlands today. The entire Dutch government resigned after a scathing report revealed tax authorities unfairly targeted thousands of poor families, accusing them of fraudulently claiming child benefits. Prime Minister Mark Rutte said political responsibility for the scandal lay with his cabinet, which he said had decided collectively it had no option but to resign. The centre-right party will continue to run the Netherlands in a caretaker capacity and oversee the COVID-19 vaccine rollout until an election in March. Ahead, office space in a pandemic. Can businesses afford keeping them if nobody's in them? The pandemic is having impacts in all kinds of places. A new real estate report shows 1 in 10 offices across the country is vacant, an indication of how many people are working from home. Robin Gill looks at what that means for business owners leasing rows of empty offices.
Phoebe Young doesn't want to give up this view, but she's the only one at her company's Vancouver headquarters. Normally, 12 employees would fill up the space, but no one's coming in.
We're looking at the pure bottom line right now. And, over the last year, we've tried to keep our ship afloat. And thankfully we have, and we're doing well. But at the same time, I think we have to make some good business decisions right now. 80% of the time has been empty. So you do the math.
She's giving up the lease like so many other businesses, leaving offices dark in major Canadian centres.
Downtown Toronto, for instance, downtown Vancouver, you're seeing 10, maybe 15% of the people who used to come into the office are still coming into the office. Whereas when you start looking into the suburban areas or more car-centric markets, you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 50% attendance levels.
If companies aren't using it, they're losing it, boosting vacancy rates. In Vancouver, it's 4.9%, up from 2.9% the year before. In Toronto, the rate is 6.2% compared to 5% in 2019. Calgary has seen it the worst, a 25.7% vacancy rate, a double whammy of COVID-19 and Alberta's economic downturn.
Where we've seen the biggest surge in the vacancy has been in the sublease market, and with tenants looking to sublease out their space to another tenant. And in that market, I think you're going to see tenants who really want to sublease their space begin to discount that space.
When it is business as usual, there are predictions the office space won't be the same, and companies will have to allow flexibility for working from home.
You're not going to get them back until they feel safe.
It's more about the comfort levels. It's more about how companies are going to allow people to come back into the office, but still remain a little more spaced out, because they are cognizant of the fact that we have been very dense in these office spaces over the last few years.
When Phoebe Young does get back into the office, it won't be full time.
For myself is that I save like about an hour of commute time there and back. And that's a lot of time you can spend at your desk.
As the boss, she has a whole new view of the hybrid situation that has been presented to her and her staff. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
Up next, our Mike Armstrong crosses the border and finds out why some Republicans are abandoning Trump. Over the 4 years President Trump has been in the White House, his support among Republicans has been nearly rock solid. Now, cracks appear to be developing. Some longtime Republicans have had enough. Mike Armstrong is on the road in Pennsylvania, and he's been talking to some of them.
It was scary.
Melissa Dye was working from home during the riot at the Capitol, glued to her TV. USA! What she watched, she blames on Donald Trump and the Republican Party, her party. Dye was a Republican committee member in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, but drew up a resignation letter that same night.
It was tough. I've dedicated 10 plus years of my life to doing this and to the party, and it was a tough thing to abandon.
This is the office in Cumberland County where people register their party affiliation. They've been busy. In the 5 days after the riot in D.C., 190 Republicans called to change their party. Statewide, it was more than 4,000.
There's a significant division within the party that we're going to have to face one way or another.
Gary Eichelberger is a commissioner in Cumberland County and a Republican nervous about what he's seeing.
I easily win.
Eichelberger says Republican politicians questioning the integrity of the election led to poll workers being abused before, during, and after voting day. And then came the riot in D.C. Conspiracy theories about voting machines or dead voters have pushed some in the party, he says, to reject reality.
You can't ignore those theories because they've taken root among a certain population that is pretty sizable now.
Eichelberger fears the rejectionists in his party may push out the realists. There's no exodus at this point, but he says if the bleeding doesn't stop, it could hurt Republican strongholds. He's feeling that. It could also hurt the country.
When our very foundation of our representative system and our public institutions come into doubt, that is not something you fix overnight.
Now, there's no question most are sticking with Trump, more entrenched in his camp than ever, but there are those put off by it all. One Lancaster Republican who left the party over the riot posted this tweet with a photo of the local Republican office this week. It's Trump sign still on the building. He says in the past, when an election was over, the signs would come down and people would start thinking about governing. The fact it's still up 2 months later, he says, shows it's the party of Trump. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Later on tonight, I'm hosting an hour-long special about stories that continue to dominate 2021, American politics and the pandemic. You can watch 2021, What Lies Ahead, later tonight on Global. That is Global National for this Friday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this beautiful shot of the Fraser River in Chilliwack, BC. A little bit of calm for your day. Please email Your Canada to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. I'll see you a little later for our Global News special. For now, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.